I'm Chris Cooper. I've been a building volunteer here since I think 2012. I'm ashamed to say that, like many Sheffielders, unfortunately, I never heard of Portland Works or anything of its history. And it was first drawn to my attention when, for my birthday, my son gave me a batch of shares. And it was at that point I first became involved with it. The first time I came to Portland Works was a bright, cold, sunny morning, and I parked outside and got out of the car, and the first thing I noticed, and which I liked straight away, being at least partly a building surveyor, were the many different panels of brickwork between the ground and first floor windows. Each is laid to a different pattern, and I liked that. I came into the yard and I was immediately accosted by someone, I can't remember who said, "Oh, hello, have you got a wheelbarrow on you?" Well, that struck me as being rather funny because it was just the sort of question that my father used to ask me. And of course I hadn't, so I was back into the car and I went home and got the wheelbarrow and came back with it. And there were several other people looking down a hole at the bottom of the yard. This turned out to be a sludge pit, part of the drainage system, and before long the barrow was taken over and I was down the hole digging out extremely smelly, stinking sludge from the bottom, and I have that feeling that somewhere there's a photograph of me doing that. I've never minded a grubby job. In my work I often found it much more convenient and quicker to get small building and little jobs done myself than get tradesmen if I could do the job in a few minutes, and I suppose I've always just liked that sort of thing. And above all, I like the camaraderie. I was shortly to retire and I needed some project to work on, and I suppose we've all, or many of us, at one time or another wanted to play Bob the Builder, and having been involved in buildings from a professional point of view all my working life, it was nice to get down to the grassroots of it and to meet what turned out to be an extraordinarily eclectic mix of building volunteers, people from all trades and professions. The firm I worked for were surveyors to the Sheffield Church Burgesses Trust, which effectively made me surveyor to Sheffield Cathedral. And I suppose that was what originally gave me an interest in the construction and maintenance and refurbishment of old buildings. The trust, as part of their income portfolio, owned a number of properties in Sheffield, and our job was also involved with the maintenance and often the refurbishment and alteration of those buildings as well. So I suppose in that way I had a fairly strong background which attracted me to this, but to actually deal with the job from the point of view of the tradesman as opposed to that of the surveyor. I enjoy more or less any task, I think. And that's because even with tasks that I've never attempted before, we've been lucky enough to have really good grounding, particularly from Bill Gray, who is an excellent tradesman in every sort of trade associated with buildings. We've learned such a lot from him, and particularly whereas we might well have been doing it from a DIY point of view before, we've learned to do it properly and professionally, and that I find very fulfilling. When we started, there were probably 6, 8, 10 of us that came regularly on Saturdays, and then the numbers started building up when we moved to Tuesdays about the time I retired in 2014. A lot of the processes that I've learned have really been just improving on DIY skills, because one gets the opportunity to do a lot more of them than you would at home. In later years, Bill has been particularly helpful in giving us all lots of little tricks of the trade. For instance, it may sound daft, but I'm an awful lot better at sawing a straight line in a long piece of wood than I used to be. We had a gentleman in showing us how to repoint brickwork properly. That was excellent, because there's nothing worse than you can do to a brick-built building than to repoint it badly. It's all sorts of things like that, really, yes. We have a very special band of volunteers here who have gelled, I think, extremely well, and I think part of the reason from that is that we are almost without exception from extraordinarily different backgrounds, and therefore we exchange views and ideas as opposed to perhaps, in the worst scenario if you like, arguing about best methods of doing them. From my point of view, I think the camaraderie issue is perhaps the most important. I would miss it intensely if I wasn't coming down here regularly, particularly now I'm on my own. I was widowed just shortly after I started work here. I've already mentioned that the camaraderie here is very important to me, and my feeling is that it's really quite important to many of the other volunteers who come. They clearly enjoy themselves. Well, they must do, mustn't they? Whatever they're doing. And they go on coming every Tuesday, week in, week out, come rain or shine. And I think, like me, they go home feeling satisfied that they've done a job which was well worth doing, and that they've had a chance to talk and to exchange views with other people on any number of issues that may come up, whether it's to do with the works or the world at large. I'm trying to think of some of the highlights of my time here. I've already mentioned the first time I came and being impressed with the building itself. I think after that was when we started to have some open days, and the first proper open working day we had, I think, 770 people into the works. That was really quite something. Another highlight was by the time we finally got scaffolding put up the chimney and we were able to look down on the whole yard from that sort of height. And finally, above all, a job we'd been thinking about for many years, all sorts of preparation work going on, fundraising, meetings with English Heritage and other sponsors. We eventually got most of the major roofs around and within the yard properly reslated, and there's nothing like a building with a good roof. I've had very few low points in my experiences at Portland Works. I think my low point actually is now while I'm being interviewed. That's nothing to do with the interviewers. It's just that my health hasn't been so good lately, and I've been unable, unfortunately, to be able to do so many of the jobs I like to be doing. However, in the next few months I'm hoping that's all going to be put right and I shall be back in full steam again. Our work here is, of course, generally very serious, but it does us all good to have a bit of a laugh from time to time. One little incident I do remember, though others may not. Our volunteers were creating a new partition between two rooms at the top of B block, which is to the left of the yard. And they had attained very nearly the top of the wall with their plasterboarding when they suddenly realised that there was no way out from the side on which they were working, but with the help of several ladders, stools, etc., they managed to squeeze over the top so that we could finish the job off from the far side. My aspirations for the future are that in the short to medium term at least, we existing volunteers will be able to carry on with the maintenance and improvement of the buildings on the same basis that we've done it for many years now. The most important thing, though, is that hopefully we shall be able to encourage younger volunteers, particularly as they come into retirement, to join us and to keep the flow going as we eventually, I suppose, become too old to do the job. In the longer term, once we have all the buildings in order, the aim is that the premises will be run on a much more secure financial basis, so that some of the bigger jobs can be done on a contractual, professional basis.